Okay, I've got 1 p.m. Pacific, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, and thanks so much for joining. My name is Justin Clem. I'm the founder and CEO of Ghost Inspector, and really excited to be here today. Renata shortly is going to present to you on Back to Basics with Ghost Inspector. Renata Centillion is our Senior Operations and Strategy Manager. And before I give her a proper introduction, I just want to throw out a couple of notes that we've got on our agenda. The first thing I want to mention is this is intended to be kind of a back to basics webinar. And so Renata is going to cover some of our more core use cases, including a few really interesting ones like email testing. But we've done a number of these webinars now, and we've got an advanced one on our blog from back in June, getting the most out of Ghost Inspector. So if you're looking for some more material, take a look at that. I also wanted to mention that October, the month of Halloween, Ghost Inspector, we got to celebrate Halloween. So we've got some fun things planned for the month. We're calling it our Customer Appreciation Month, and we're going to celebrate some of our really awesome customers who've been with us. We've got some fun things planned. We've got another webinar that'll come up that's focused on WordPress. So we've got a WordPress-based website. Stay tuned for that. The last note I want to make is I'll be around during the webinar in the background, taking a look at QA and the chat channel. So feel free to throw out questions and I'll try my best to answer them. And we'll try to do a little bit of a QA wrap up at the end. So with all that said, I want to introduce you all again to Renata Centillion, our Senior Operations Strategy Manager. Renata has been with the company for years and years. If you've talked to us on support or sales, you've undoubtedly spoken with Renata. She knows the product inside and out. And I'm really excited for her to present to you on Back to Basics with Ghost Inspector today. So I'm going to hand it over to Renata.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining me today. As just mentioned, I'm Renata Centillion, and it's a pleasure to host. If you've gone to any of the other webinars, I've emceed in the past, but this is the first webinar I'm acting as host, so very excited. For any first-time new Ghost Inspector users or anyone who's very new to our product, a quick overview. Ghost Inspector is an automated testing service that helps you create and run browser tests without any coding required. So now anyone can create their own test suites. So for today's agenda, I'll review how simple it is to create a test using our browser extension. I'll go over creating a test using our checking email feature. I'll go over some of our new features that are built into our browser extension. We just released yesterday an update, a new revamp to our extension. So if you have used Ghost Inspector, there might be something new you learned today. And also walk through what you'll get back from Ghost Inspector in the test results page. And of course, at the end, we'll answer any questions. If you feel more comfortable, go ahead and write those questions in the chat, and Justin will answer or save them for the end. And if we don't get to your question today, feel free to reach out to help@ghostinspector.com or using our intercom widget at the bottom right-hand corner of our app or website. So I'll go ahead and start the screen share. Just give me a second. Great. So this is our Ghost Inspector dashboard page. Ghost Inspector allows you to organize your tests into folders and suites. For today's example, I've gone ahead and created a demo suite for us. I've just created one, called it demo, left it blank. There's nothing yet in it. If you are familiar with the elements you're going to be using and the URL and everything else, you can go ahead and start your test right over here, or you're maybe starting your test using modularization, which I'll talk a little bit about later. You can go ahead and just write the test name here, the URL, create, and that'll kick you over to our test editor. Let's see, but let me just hide this here. More common is our using our browser extension, which is available on Chrome and Firefox. This is Ghost icon on the top right-hand corner. And for today's demo, we've got this website that we've created ourselves, little mock e-commerce website here. And I'm going to go ahead and turn on the extension. If it's your first time using the extension, you will have to log in. You can create a new test or add to an existing test. You can see here, you can actually start a recording at any point during a test that's already created in your system, in your organization. You can add it to the beginning of a test, after a specific step, or the end. But for today's test, I'm just going to create a new test, select record. And you'll see here now that the ghost icon on the extension now reads record, or rec for short. That lets me know that all of my actions are now being recorded by Ghost Inspector. So I'm going to select the extension one more time to show you the new menu items. So these has been added yesterday for our new extension revamp. So you might see some new options here. So previously you used to add capture screenshot steps at the end after you've recorded your test in our test editor. You can now add a capture screenshot step in the middle of your recording while you're recording your test. I'll show you that in a minute. We also added a step to check for accessibility during your recording. You just select that option. Check accessibility is a recently added feature. This allows you to run some accessibility checks. So if you're required or want to check your website to make sure that anyone can access your test, your website, and make it friendly for anyone with any disabilities, definitely use our check accessibility. This will check for accessibility options on the page that you're currently on. It won't check it for every page on your site, just the page it's currently on. And if you're interested in learning more, we did have a webinar on this feature alone, and you can find that recording in our blog. Make assertions, that's how you would record an assertion. I'll show you that in a minute. Record operations, just going back to the record option. So let me quickly just show you how it all works now that we've reviewed the options there. So now going to our e-commerce website we have here, and we're acting as a QA member or product manager, whatever it may be here, and you want to make sure that your website is always working as it should be. So let's go to maybe this first item on this list here, this cup planter. Select the item here. Maybe design has been working on this, and you want to make sure it looks the same across all the different browser versions, maybe mobile resolutions. So I'm going to go ahead and capture a screenshot. And so when I run my tests again against all the options Ghost Inspector has, I can make sure that it's looking sharp. So I'm going to go ahead and capture a screenshot. Great. I selected that option and I got back this message from Ghost Inspector that the screenshot step was recorded. Great. I also want to make sure that anytime a customer is using my e-commerce site, that this add to cart feature is always here. It's always important that customers can add something to cart. So I'm going to take this time to create an assertion. So an assertion allows you to confirm that certain conditions are met on the page. So I'm going to select make assertions. So now we're in what we call assertions mode. You'll see under my mouse, there's these crosshairs hovering over elements. So I'm going to just hover over add to cart and select. Again, I'm getting confirmation from Ghost Inspector that the assertion was recorded. To hop back into the record function, I'm just going to go back to record operations, and now I'm back into the regular mode. I'm not in assertions mode. So we always recommend at least one assertion per test, but really we highly recommend using as many as you'd like. This is really what's making those checks on your tests there. And there's lots of different options that you can choose from. At the moment, Ghost Inspector, while you're recording, it's choosing the best one it thinks for you. But there's a lot of options. It can be anything from element is present to text is equal to. So you can be very specific here. I want to make sure nothing is being covered by the add to cart function or anything. I want to make sure that it's always there and never missing by any changes that are made to the site. Great. So I'm going to actually go ahead and add to cart, because during this test, I'm going to make sure that the whole checkout flow is working correctly. So great, add it to cart. Awesome. Let's go into the cart. Looks like it's there. Let's go ahead and check out. So all of these actions are being recorded. For ease, we've actually made it. We've got a quick saved information here. And for using our checking email feature, if anyone's familiar with testing and logging into third-party email providers such as Gmail or Yahoo, they're going to have lots of securities and CAPTCHAs put in place to prevent things from like ghost inspectors. They're really trying to prevent bots from coming in and trying to get into these emails. So it'll come up and it'll be difficult for you to check your email during any types of testing. So what Ghost Inspector's done is we've created our own mock emails system. And so in order to reach it, you can use any sort of username with this email. So once you go ahead and send an email, we'll show you how you can access it. But this is all you have to do to create an email and to use our inbox. So I'm going to go ahead and send this out, select pay. Great, looks like it was sent through. And I'm going to go ahead and make another assertion to make sure that anytime someone pays, that they're getting this confirmation, letting me know that all that was sent correctly. Great. So you can finish your test here, but if you want to go ahead and do the email check during this time, so this email was sent, the confirmation was sent, and this user should have gotten an email confirmation that their order was sent in. So in order to reach the Ghost Inspector email, you would go to email.ghostinspector and then / whatever that username you selected was. So I'm just going to select, and again, I'm still recording in Ghost Inspector. So Ghost Inspector is going to go to this URL. And here's the inbox that we've created for you. So these emails are saved for an hour. So I'm just going to go ahead. Oh, I'm in assertions mode. I'm going to get back out. I'm going to select the email. Looks good. I know it's not a very exciting email. I'm going to go ahead and make an assertion on this email as well. So I'm going to make sure that it's another order confirmation so that this email is correct and that it's not maybe like a password reset email or something like that. Great, so that's it. I'm going to finish testing. Perfect. I'm going to give this a name, maybe checkout flow plus email confirmation. And I'm going to save it to the demo suite we've created. Great, view test. I'm going to give that test a few seconds to run. Let's head back to that demo. Let's talk about this form that we filled out. I had it sort of easily set up, but let's say each time you run this test, you don't mind what the data is, but you do want it to be random each time. We do have some built-in variables for you to use that cover a lot of those very commonly used form informations, emails, state, city, titles, first name, last name, maybe just some lorem ipsum, some filler text. And then we do have, what'll come in handy for building unique email addresses, we have a timestamp. So this will generate the current timestamp while the test is run, as well as an alphanumeric option. So this will generate a 16-character alphanumeric string for you. So this is great for you to create random data for your test each time using those variables. Let's say you have a specific set of data you want to use. Well, you can upload a CSV file and use each line as the variables that you want to use for the test. And Ghost Inspector will take each line and run it across that same test for you using those specific sets of information. You can upload that CSV file, save it to the test, and run that test on a schedule just like you would any other test on Ghost Inspector. So those are some options for you. Let's check in on that test, see how it's doing. Great, so it finished. This is what you're going to get back from Ghost Inspector. At the top, you have some basic information. The test took 42 seconds to run on our side. Geolocation is from Northern Virginia in the USA. Now that's the default geolocation. We do have lots of geolocation and international options. You can find those in your settings. And we also have we provide the IP addresses as well in our documentation. So if you need to create an allow list, if you need to have that cleared, perhaps you're using Google Analytics and you want to make sure that the Ghost Inspector traffic isn't messing those up, you can go ahead and find those IP addresses there. Great. So at the bottom, we have our steps. Everything's highlighted in green with these check marks. That lets me know that everything passed. You can see all the clicks and all the actions that were taken. Everything was recorded. Here's that capture screenshot. It looks great. Excellent. Everything looks great. At the bottom is the test run history. This will be saved for 6 months, and as that time runs out, the test will be removed. You can download some of the data as a CSV file, and you can download the video recordings and screenshots all locally, so you can keep those as long as you want. Speaking of the recording, here's the recording. We have the step on the top right-hand corner, so you can follow along. We also highlight in green a little bit of where the action is, because these videos can go by pretty fast, but everything looks awesome. Great. And our screenshot comparison feature. So our screenshot comparison features happens on the last step of the test. So this is the first time the test has run, so there's nothing to compare it to. This screenshot is actually what we call the baseline. So if we had another test run, it would be a side-by-side comparison. And it's a pixel by pixel comparison. The changes will show up in red. And we give it sort of like a percentage count in our system. So it's like a 0 to 100% change. And you can also set up in your settings a tolerance level. So let's say, there's some changes you sometimes kind of expect and you don't want it to fail every time there's like a smidge of a change. So you can go ahead and say anything under 5% change, don't mark it as a failure. Or you can set it to 0 if you want to be very strict. If there's a change you're expecting to the page, you can go ahead and tell Ghost Inspector to accept the new screenshot as a baseline, and Ghost Inspector will know to use that as the new baseline moving forward. We also have settings for a lot of these options here for things like, let's say there's like a marketing widget that's always changing on the page and you want to exclude that. There's an option to exclude anything from that screenshot, or you can target a specific element of the screenshot as well. So there's a few options there. You can check those out in your settings. Great. And we do have an API. Lots of our customers are using Ghost Inspector with our API. We have lots of integrations. Customers are setting up Ghost Inspector to run their tests pre or post deployment. We have lots of CI integrations and things like that. So very handy there. Great. And then let's say there's a change made to the test. You can go ahead and maintain your test, make any changes in your edit steps here. So hopefully we've made it easy to move some steps around. You can go ahead and add more screenshots, capture screenshots here, as well as that accessibility check. If you are familiar with any development, we do have an execute JavaScript step here. Customers are using this in many ways. We do provide a built-in variable for phone numbers, but I believe it's just like a 9-digit string of numbers. And so some people need a phone number, because the form is like, for example, like 3 text fields, 3 for the first 3 numbers, and for the area code, and then 3 for the first 3 digits, and then the last 4. So some of our customers are using the execute JavaScript to make sure that they can insert 3 random numbers into those individual text fields, and lots of other fun ways there. But if you need something, execute JavaScript step is there for you. Here's more of those assertion options that I mentioned: text equals, text does not equal, text contains, and element is present, and things like that. Great. And then I mentioned earlier modularization. So let's say we always recommend for Ghost Inspector grouping some of those test steps that you're going to be reusing all the time. So a very common one, for example, is logging in. So, I had a suite set up already in this demo, and I just called it login steps. And I can go ahead and just import those steps at any time, add them to my test, and start a recording after this step. You can see this set of tests, groups of steps for the login steps are all just grouped together. They're not taking up any more room on my test. They're all grouped and imported from that step into my test. and you can sort of build your test that way, and go ahead and record your test afterwards without having to log in. You might be working in your app all day, you've already logged in, you don't need to record that over and over. So you can just go ahead and import steps from that and record your tests. So make those things easy for yourself and consider using modularization for those steps you're going to use all the time. So I'm just going to go ahead and get out of there. Great. Cancel. I'm not going to save any of these changes we've made. Great. So let's say there is a failure on your test. How will you be made aware? So we do have, sorry, that got out there. We do have email notifications. You can set up as many email addresses as you'd like in your settings, and just use comma separations. And we also have a Slack and Microsoft Teams integration as well. We also have webhooks. If we don't have a certain integration, you can use our webhooks to set something up yourself, but definitely consider using our email alerts and our integrations to get all those notifications whenever your test fails. That's how you'll be notified. So let's see. I think that covers just about everything. I want to make sure we have enough time for questions. Justin?
Yeah, so I've been answering a couple of questions in the QA, but I want to just review them. And there's one or two that I haven't gotten to yet. So let me first tackle a couple of questions that Fernando asked. He was asking about if you have a table on the page, or even like a select menu, and you wanted to choose a random selection. So click a random row or make a random selection of menu. Could you do that? So the answer is yes. You would probably have a JavaScript step first, and what it'd do is it'd count how many items are in the row. So maybe there's 20 rows in the table, and then it'd generate a number between 1 and 20, and that could be used within the selector. So you could return that random number into a variable. Variables are something we support, and then drop that right into the selector and say, like, the 7th, click the name in the 7th row, or click the name in the 14th row. Same with drop-down menus. The only caveat I'll mention is that in most cases, you're probably better off not choosing random routes with your test. I think sometimes it seems like I'll have my test do this random stuff so that it'll cover like any kind of situation, but generally from a management perspective, in most cases you want your test doing something very specific so that you know exactly what the outcome is going to be. But if it's something kind of minor, like selecting one profile versus another profile, then that may come in handy. The other question Fernando asked was about using random data. So for instance, in the checkout form that Renata interacted with, could you drop in a random name and email address? That's also something we support. You'll find that in our documentation on our variables page. So we have different variables that will assign, like Renata's got it pulled up on the screen here, first name, last name, and that pulls. It's not going to be necessarily unique every time, but we've got a big pool of first names and last names and so on that we pull from and drop in for you. You can also generate these yourself with JavaScript. And there are also simpler ones like timestamps and things like that, which can actually come in handy when you're using our email testing feature. There's one more question on there from Nicholas. His question was whether it was possible to do some validation within the capture screenshot step, like screenshotting a sub rectangle or something else. Yes, so for both the final screenshot and the screenshot steps, you do have the ability to specify a certain element that you want to capture the screenshot of. So instead of taking a screenshot of the entire page, you can take a screenshot of just a specific element. So maybe like a form on the page, or even something as small as a button. That's not something baked into the recorder just yet. So the recorder will capture a screenshot of the entire page, but we're not actually, if you click on the edit link for that step number 2 there, yeah, pull that up. So you'll see when you open up this step, there's actually a target field above at the top of that step. And you can use that to specify a specific element that you want to capture. What we're working on next is allowing these screenshot steps to do the comparison. So right now, the comparison and visual checking happens at that screenshot at the end. And these are generally more for kind of reference that you look at manually. But we want to have these tracking baselines and doing the comparisons as well. So that's something we're working to support in the near future. One more question here from, I believe it's Manu. I hope I'm pronouncing that okay. Says for the email notification for any failure, is that done at the suite level or can it be done at the user level? So the notifications can be customized at the test level, the suite level, or across the entire organization. We don't have a way to customize it per user account, but you can certainly specify like which of your team members should be notified. So you can put in their email addresses for one test and different email address for another test. You can also forego the test emails themselves, and you can have a suite email that gives like a summary of the whole suite run. So it might list your 20 tests and whether they passed or failed. And there's a whole lot of flexibility around who gets notified, when they're sent, how often they're sent. So in most cases, just about anything you want to do there with notifications that the system's going to allow for. Let's see. A question from Lori. She's asking whether you have to use random names, addresses, etc. on the forms. No, not at all. You can certainly just have a specific value plugged in, and in most cases, that's totally fine. You'd only use the random variables if there was a specific reason that you wanted a new name in there every time. One example that we see sometimes is if you have a test that's like creating a user account, and those user accounts, let's say, are like they stay in your testing system. So if you run your test and it creates like test user, and then you run it again and tries to create test user, and that name is taken. So in those cases, you can use a timestamp, and so that it'll be like test user 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 with a number that's like incrementing with the time. So in general, you don't really need to use the random stuff unless there's a condition that makes you. One more question from Lori. I want to test a contact form submission across a site that is also translated into 6 languages. So that's definitely something we are generally able to support. We do have an option actually to specify the language being used in the browser for the test run. So you can run your test. For instance, even this test that Renata has pulled up right now, she could set this to run with the browser language set to French, for instance. And if that's something your website supports, it would render your website and present it in the French language. So what's nice is you can actually take one test, assuming the site is sort of under the hood the same for all these different languages. You can have one test and you can just run it using the different languages. If the site is like different enough, like if there are sort of different versions for different languages, then you may need to have a specific test for each language version. But that is a setting that you can adjust with Ghost Inspector.
Yeah, Justin, I think before we wrap up, I think I'll quickly show how to run all these tests across some of our different options we offer. This can be set in our settings, but we do have sort of this run test with custom settings option where you can sort of quickly drop in and run a test quickly one time with any options you'd like. Here are some of those geolocation options I mentioned. You can see the international options that we mentioned, and I'm actually in California, so let's just run these. And I've got all of these options selected, and Ghost Inspector will actually run these in combination. So it'll run it across Northern California, across all of these options that I've selected. So really quickly, I can run this and it's selected all those options for me. And that's really how easy it is. All the time that it would have taken me to run these tests manually are now being run in a few seconds here. So, and in parallel, I should add, which is super great way to save a lot of time for yourself. So I hope that this has been super helpful for everyone today. If we didn't get to your questions, feel free to reach out to us in support, and definitely look out for our October time. Justin didn't mention that we will have some giveaways. We have some swag giveaways and some prizes for just attending our webinar. So it should be a really fun time, and we hope everyone can attend.
Yeah, thanks, Renata. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining. You know what? There's a couple of questions I can answer really quickly. So let me just
Sure.
I'll try to give some responses because I can't type these fast enough. So Tim asked, how common is it for folks to use the same name when you're using our Ghost Inspector email testing service? Would you use like test@email.ghostinspector.com? And I strongly recommend using something unique there. The names are not reserved. So if you use test and somebody else uses test, you're going to be essentially sharing an inbox with that person. So what we actually recommend in our docs is using our timestamp variable. And so what you would do is each time your test runs, you actually generate a unique username so instead of just test, it'll be test with a string of numbers that are basically a millisecond timestamp. And that's covered in our docs. And that way you're in the clear. The name is unique and specific enough that you're not going to conflict with anybody. So that's definitely my recommendation. There's one question about supporting additional browsers. It's definitely something we're working on. Edge and IE are the next two that we've been working on. Edge now, it's a little bit of a overlap. Like Edge ultimately uses the same engine as Chrome now. Brave, I believe, also uses Chromium under the hood, but definitely there's some peripheral parts of those browsers that we want to allow support for. And Safari is also one that we hope to support in the future, but we're just not quite there yet. The last question I saw was a PDF testing. Can you test the download and upload of PDF content? You can certainly upload PDFs. We support uploading files during our tests. You can also generally open a PDF. There's a couple of sort of gotchas and things we can explain if you write into support, but generally you can open up a PDF and capture a screenshot of it in the test. We don't at the moment support downloading files during your tests. So you would not be able to download a PDF and then assert the file size or open it. Basically everything in the Ghost Inspector test happens in the context of the browser. But depending on what you're looking for, it may be something we're able to support. I think that's everything. So I want to say thanks again to all of our guests for joining and being with us during the webinar, and a really big thank you to Renata for walking us through that really awesome information. This webinar will be published probably early next week on our blog. So take a look and feel free to refer back to it. And we hope everyone has a wonderful day.